Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, a human element series. This is episode 266. I'm Chris Hadnaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009. As always, this series is sponsored by Social Engineer, and I want to talk to you about some really exciting things. And so you will probably see Dr. Abbie here with me. We'll talk about that in a second. But Dr. Abbie and I have released an elicitation course. It's an audio-only course, and it's been out for a couple of months now, and it's getting a lot of really positive feedback. Of course, when we first launched it, we made some corrections to it and fixed some errors that you guys helped us point out. So thank you for all the students that helped us do that. But now it is running, and we have a lot of people in there. So if you're interested in learning all about elicitation and how you can use it in everyday life, then you can go to social-engineer.com, click on the training, and you'll be able to see it there. It's audio only, and if you want, there's some certifications and tests if you take that version of the course to really help you out in getting elicitation mastering. Also, October 30th, we are excited to bring back the Human Behavior Conference. Really excited about that. I mean, if any of you that were there in 2020, yeah, I know it was right before COVID, but it was an awesome event. Well, we're bringing it back as a one-day event this year, and it's just going to be Joe Navarro, which everyone knows he's awesome. And this will be his only U.S. event that he's doing in 2024. And then Dr. Abbie will be there too, and myself, and we'll be doing a whole day workshop. We'll be covering human behavior, influence, persuasion, elicitation, pretexting, and basically we're going to have some great exercises that will tie it all together for you. Go to humanbehaviorcon.com and check it out. And if you can't remember that link, you can just go to social-engineer.com and there's a link on top. But we hope to see you there October 30 here in Orlando. One of the main questions we get is, will it be online and live? Sorry, the answer is no. It will only be live for this year. We have a limited space. We're renting the Rice Pavilion at Rollins College, and it's limited, I think, to 180 people. So
in Orlando.
In Orlando. Yes. Thank you for that. I always forget to mention, just to figure everyone knows where it is, but it is in Orlando. So you can fly down in October. It's beautiful down here that time of year, and we hope to see you there. So get signed up quick before those seats fill up. Okay, a couple other quick announcements for housekeeping. So, if you're interested in social engineering, you should be in our Slack channel. I think I counted the other day about 1,500 people in there, and it's really exciting because, we talk about all aspects of SE. We got people in there talking about pretexting and talking about elicitation, the psychology of it, people who do research into it, or people who are practitioners or want to be. It's family friendly and legal. So if you'd like that kind of chat, come on in, join us, and we'll have you there. Also, I want to invite everyone to take a moment to go check out innocentlivesfoundation.org. Another really exciting announcement. We're back for our year 2 gala over in LA. Last year, if you were there, we had the band, the Action Figures. It's a great band made up of all these actors that actually have action figures. That's kind of how they came up with the name of it. And they fell in love with us and we fell in love with them. So this year they opened up their studio. It's called the Woodshed. So it's going to be like a kind of a gig and a gala all at once. So we're going to have them playing music all night. We're going to have a lot of food there and some really great items to auction off. If you want to join us, you can go to innocentlivesfoundation.org. You can find some information there. And of course, also, if you want to support us, if you can't make it out, you can donate to our cause, helping us to save kids from the horrors of child abuse and child abuse material. That's our mission there. So you can go check it out and get some information on the site. And if you like the music on the podcast, it is none other than Clutch, the best rock and roll band on earth. You can go to clutchmerch.com, check out their stuff. As everyone knows, I must have said this 1,000 times. Neil has helped start the ILF 6.5 years ago. He's the lead singer of the band, and I've been a fan of theirs since I was 17. So go listen to them just because I said so. There, that's enough. Okay, now if you like the episode, give us a thumbs up, a heart, a like, all these different things. Now, before we get to our guest, we have a big announcement because here's the deal. Normally, the Human Element series, I have a guest that's not Dr. Abbie, not from the company here, and we talk about usually some other things that are interesting that we can tie into SE, but we have a really, really big announcement. If you're listening to this podcast this podcast will come out on June 8th. So it is only, one day away, right, Abbie? July 8th. We're not going back in time. And it comes out July 9th, right? Yes. So Dr. Abbie has her very first book coming out on July 9th. And we're so excited about it. I had a chance to read it beforehand, and we wanted to have her on the show to talk all about that. But since normally when Dr. Abbie's here on the episode, she gives us a very little snippet about who she is. Let me tell you a little bit about her and her background. So we hired her on because she brings a level of experience and scientific validation to her work. She's a scientist and a practitioner in the field of human behavior. The United States Department of State has recognized her international acclaim and record of extraordinary achievements and placed her in the top 1% of her field. Underscoring her recognized expertise, Dr. Abbie has been invited to provide specialized behavior analysis training for elite units such as the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which you might have saw my post all about that. That was awesome. And this group includes agents from the U.S. Secret Service, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and local law enforcement agencies. She's completed her PhD in psychology, and Dr. Abbie became a professor of psychology by the age of 23. She's now the director of education here at Social Engineer and specializes in behavior analysis. She's a regular contributor to Forbes and Apple News. Abbie also has been featured in WIRED and Forbes Breaking news. She is an active member of several internationally recognized research groups and was awarded Reviewer of the Year in 2020 for her significant contribution to the academic community. Additionally, she's an author, as we're talking about today, expert consultant, coach, and if you want a little preview of her book, you need to go check out her TEDx talk, which is on YouTube. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, and then you'll know everything about what's coming out tomorrow. Okay. Now, you can pause this podcast for a second, go to Amazon, pre-order the book or get it because it's out, and you'll get it tomorrow. And then come back and listen to the episode because then we're going to learn all about what this book is about. So, Abbie, first let's start off with, because, I got a chance to read the book and listen to your TEDx talk, and it's quite deep and personal. Yes. And you did not hold back too much about your life in this book. No. So what would inspire you to do that, to write a book this deep and personal?
It's interesting because anyone that knows me and has known me, say, a year and a half ago, would know a very different version of me. My perception publicly is very stoic. I am very tough love. I have always been very tough love. I'm not very open. I'm someone who is very private. I keep myself very professional. I prefer to hold myself a particular way in my professional life. And my professional life is mostly my entire life. I don't have a huge personal life. I just work.
Shocking.
Shocking, I know. So people have known very little about me. And as a professor, I felt that I had to carry myself a certain way. But I had gone through a lot of really difficult things in my life. And when I was trying to connect with students and help them, I realized that I wasn't really a source of comfort for them because they couldn't connect with me. And when I was going through some really dark times, I was looking to self-help books to help me get out of them. And as well-meaning as those books were, they painted a very false narrative of what healing is. It was very appealing. You read these books about being bulletproof and about everything being fine and it's going to be okay. And that isn't the reality of how human beings work. And they weren't helpful. They motivate in the short term, but they don't produce long-term results for healing because that's not how human beings work. So I turned to the literature and got myself through it based on, well, what if I was a data point? What would I tell that data point to do? I tried to understand my own behavior and then work through it that way. And I got myself out of not just some dark times, some really awful periods in my life where at one point, I was ready to commit suicide. I was just really done. And then I fast forward 2.5 years later and I'm living in Florida, living my dream in a dream job, happier than I've ever been. And I really wanted to give that education to other people. And there's two parts of it. There's the providing the science to them through the research in a way that's accessible. I wanted them to get the science and the neuroscience and the psychology without feeling like they're reading a science book, so anyone can have it. But I also realized that I had to be someone that people felt comfortable coming to. And being that stoic, tough love, closed off person wasn't helpful. I wasn't someone they felt comfortable with. And I also realized I can't tell people to do the hard work, talk about your traumas and your shame if I'm here hiding mine. So I realized that this has got to be a really vulnerable book if it's going to do what I want it to do.
Yeah, that's a powerful answer. Now, one of the things I didn't mention, so let's talk about the title of the book. So it's called Work in Progress: The Road to Empowerment, the Journey Through Shame. Yes. So and having read it, you focus a lot on shame. So
Yes.
whenever I thought about shame before reading your book, I kind of was always like a bad thing. You know, it was like like put it in a dark corner and don't really talk about it or think about it. Can shame have a positive side to it also?
Yes. So that was one of the other issues I really wanted to address too, because in all of these other self-help books and in popular media, shame is the enemy. You know, that's how we know shame. And it's all about how do we remove shame? How do we get rid of shame? How do we, learn not to listen to shame? And actually, that's not how shame works. Shame isn't this, devil on our shoulder necessarily. It might be, I call it the unlikely angel sometimes, because all human emotions serve a purpose, good and bad, but ultimately they serve a purpose for survival and social connection. So the brain, it weighs 2% of our body mass, but it takes up 20% of our energy. So it doesn't do things for fun. It tries to conserve energy. Everything that it does in terms of emotional functioning, it serves a purpose. But because shame is so deeply uncomfortable, we don't really listen to the purpose. We just want it to go away. And that's so human. We want it to go away. We want to feel good. We don't like to feel bad. But shame is a signal. It serves a purpose because what it ultimately does is it says to us that something we are doing or something we are feeling or behaving is conflicting with who we perceive ourselves to be or who we want to be. And that's why we feel shame. And shame and guilt are different. We can behave in a way, say we hurt someone, but we ultimately know that it was the right thing we needed to do. So we feel guilty they were hurt, but we don't feel shame. When we feel shame, it's because we've behaved in a way that ultimately conflicts with who we perceive ourselves to be or who we want to be. Now, that's very uncomfortable because if we look at that, it's like, well, why did we do it? And often the reason that we did it are difficult reasons. We did it because of traumas or because we don't understand our emotions. We don't have good emotional regulation skills. We're struggling, we're hurting, we're grieving. All of these things are very difficult to do. And sometimes we don't know. We look at ourselves and we go, I don't know why I did this. And that's also very confronting too. So we move away from it. We don't look at it. We don't face it. And if we don't face it, we can't dig deep and understand why we did it. And that shame, it's screaming out at us to say, look at me and listen to me. Because if we do look at it and listen to it, there is a reason behind our bad behaviors. But because we avoid it, we then engage in things like denial and emotional suppression, which then lead us to act in maladaptive ways, which creates more shame. And then we act in maladaptive ways to avoid that shame. And we keep getting on in this cycle, or you might even isolate ourselves. And that shame just continues to build. And because we never really address that underlying problem, it now gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So we keep wanting to get away from it. And it only gets smaller if we start to get to the root of it. But the more we run away from it, the harder that gets. So it's understandable why people don't want to face it.
Yeah.
But the only way out is through. And that's really what I wanted to show with this book, that if we want to heal and be empowered and be our best selves, we have to do that hard work. We have to really understand our emotions.
So one of the other things that the subtitle, we talk about the road to empowerment.
Yes.
And nowadays, when you hear empowerment, a lot of times it's not a negative, but it's like it's mainly geared towards maybe minority groups or women or something like that. So is that the way we want to understand this part of your book? Is that you're like empowering women to come back from something bad that happened to them?
No and yes. I am empowering women, but I'm not just empowering women. We have taken this term of empowerment, and you're so right. We see women's empowerment. We don't see men's. And often what you see in social media, and I see it a lot with popular podcasters, they will say, well, what about men? So they diss women. And then, well, what about women? So they diss men. And it's one against the other. And I really don't like that, because empowerment is something that we should all reach, regardless of age, sex, gender, occupation, orientation, anything. It's something that we should all be able to achieve. And in the book, although I write it from my perspective as a young woman, I give examples of men's mental health, and I make it clear that this isn't something that is a minority focus, But we also have very toxic ideas of what empowerment means. We have that, love me for who I am or not at all kind of concept of, I don't really need to change. You take me as I am. I have no growing to do. And again, that's very toxic. And the problem is there's no 100% clear definition of empowerment. But to me, empowerment is just a deep self-understanding and self-acceptance. And that comes from understanding our emotions and being able to regulate them. And the phrase that I use when it comes to empowerment is, you can't use me against me. I've accepted myself and I've accepted my past behaviors. I'm not perfect, but I accept and I understand myself so much that you can't use my past behaviors or things against me that I have done or I have said to hurt me, because I know and I accept them. Doesn't mean they're great. You can't use my shame to make me feel more shame. So that's the way that I like to think about it. And I think that everybody, regardless of who they are, should be able to achieve that.
It's interesting tie-in, because here you're kind of defining a positive side to shame where we can use it as a motivator.
Yes.
And then you're talking about empowerment, but not just focusing on one group, focusing on humans, basically every human. So it's like this really interesting equation you're building in this book where you're saying, instead of hiding from it, which I think is much easier to do, especially before you said when we don't understand it. I think if we make decisions sometimes based on like our adaptive child response, then we don't even know why the heck I said that or did that, right? And it's easier to run from that and go, well, that just must be something in my brain. But
exactly.
Part of the empowerment, it sounds like what you're saying, is to understand why we might have done something against our code.
Yeah, and that's why education is so key, because this book is very practical and it gives a lot of tools, but it gives a deep understanding of, well, how do our emotions feel in our body? Because a lot of the time we react in maladaptive ways because we don't understand what's going on. And if you don't understand something, you can't remedy it. How can I remedy an emotion that I don't know what I'm feeling? Like if I feel this feeling in my body and I'm like, okay, well, I'm angry. I feel rage. I'm going to act out. Usually what's underneath that anger, because anger is a secondary emotion. Underneath that is usually hurt or grief or pain or confusion, disappointment. And if we don't understand how to recognize how it feels, regulate it, dig deep, we're going to act on that secondary emotion. So I wanted to provide that understanding. And it's really difficult to do when we have these notions in popular media that we're so comfortable with. And the difficulty with self-reflection too is the way that it's painted is very, I sit in a field of roses and I sit and I meditate and flowers grow around me. And it's like, this healing thing is so beautiful. And that isn't healing. And
not in my experience, at least.
No, it's not my experience either. Healing is messy and it's painful and it's uncomfortable and it's not appealing. If a book says this is going to hurt your feelings really bad, but please read it because it'll be helpful. That's what my book is. I make no attempt to say this is going to be a really fun read. It should be a good read, and I hope it's a good read. But it isn't a comfortable read because it's confronting, and healing isn't comfortable. It shouldn't be. It is painful, but that's the reality of it, because when it comes to our emotions, when we feel them, we can do three things. We can escape them, we can suppress them, we can heal them. And healing it means feeling it. And that is the hard part, because we don't really want to feel that negative stuff. That's sitting in the flowers with rainbows and ponies. Oh, I love that. Such a great idea. But that isn't reality. No. And I don't want to deal with the negative stuff, but the only way out is through. You have to. But it doesn't mean that you have to go completely with no guidance, because when we're trying to heal, not everybody has the benefit of therapy, and therapy is also a slow process. I wanted to give that education because I wanted people to fully understand their own thoughts and feelings and emotions and have a toolkit. I didn't want to say, here's a step-by-step guide on how to heal trauma. That's not what I do. It's here's how to understand what you're feeling. And here's how to put this into action, because everybody's situation is different. I wanted to make people accountable for their own emotions and give them that understanding. And I hope that's what the book does for people.
Well, a couple of things on that. So I've never had a medicine that was really tasty, right? So I've never had a medicine like, I can't wait to take that again, right? So
except
you're right.
Calpol, if you've had that.
Oh, no. That's not what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Oh, yeah. Well, you also eat raw broccoli like a rabbit.
That is
so
true.
It's just not, you're not normal. Okay. Maybe we need another book about that. But, I want to make a comment about something you said. You said, I hope it's a good read. I am not the kind of person that picks up a book and reads it cover to cover because I have a very short attention span and I start thinking about other things. But I couldn't stop reading your book. And I was annoyed that you would only send me like one chapter every now and then because you had to finish writing the other chapter. So it was like, I was like, send it already, you know? So, and I'm not just saying that because you work for me and you're my friend. I mean, it was, like you said, it was hard. There were some chapters where I was like, okay, I'm not going to talk to Abbie for a day. You know, like I didn't want, not because I was mad at you. I just didn't want to like look at you because I felt so bad. You know, it was like, difficult. But at the end, what I really loved about what you did with the book is put science, like you would talk about something really, really deep and personal, and then you would back up the evidence of how you can heal from this with science and papers, scientific papers. And I think that added something more than I've had in most self-help books that I've read in the past. Like you said, I think we've all read one or two about the flowery unicorns and stuff, but I tend to go towards more of the ones that are all about healing and have things like that, but not a lot of them back their stuff up with science. So that was a really beneficial part of the way you wrote. And then you didn't make it so sciencey that it was like, what the heck are you saying? It was very easy to understand it, which I think is also really important because the normal person that reads this isn't going to be you.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be more like me. So
thank you. And I think a lot of these books are also written from a pedestal and it can make them pretty unappealing. Like a lot of these speeches that I see and talks that I see are from people that they say, you know, I'm healed, be like me, you know, you can reach this level of empowerment. And it gives this concept that empowerment is a thing that's reached and then you're done. And that's what I wanted to communicate with the title of the book, Work in Progress. We're never done.
Yeah.
We are never done. And that's why it's so important to teach the skills of emotional regulation rather than a step-by-step guide of how to get through situations, because you can be perfectly happy one day. Things can be great. Yeah. And then something happens, or for just no reason, you just feel stuck and you don't know why. And life can change and circumstances change and emotions change and mental health changes. And with those things, say you become a mother and that's a huge change, or a father. And that's a massive change psychologically, physiologically, biologically. And now you just had this step-by-step guide that helped you with the situation. What about this new situation? So I wanted to emphasize that the work is never done. And it was really important for me to communicate it as a flawed person. Because when I would step on stage, I had a student say to me once, you know, well, what do you know about suffering? You look like someone that's never been through anything. And it was just because I carried myself like a professor because I felt like I had to. But you really don't know the depths of someone else's suffering. And I realized that I can't put up this fake image of a person that is perfectly okay and perfectly done with the work, because I am also human too. And in the book, you know, the work isn't done for me either. There's still things, especially when it comes to, you know, my dad's sickness. I'm no way healed, but that's okay. Because none of us are all the way healed. We all struggle with things. You know, I talk about overwork as a coping mechanism. I still overwork, but I'm working on it because I am still a work in progress. Just like everybody that reads the book, we are all a work in progress. And that's something that we all need to recognize, that we are all flawed, and that's fine because we're all human.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, because it's not like, okay, I healed, now I'm done. It's over.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's valuable. With all the personal stuff in the book and all the, you know, kind of admitting all your mistakes in the past, what challenges did you have when writing this?
There were things in the book that I really didn't want to put in there because I have done things in my past that are just so not reflective of who I am today. And there's a difference between things that have been done to you and things that you decided to do.
Yeah.
When it's the things that have been done to you, and I've had a lot of really horrible things that have been done to me that were not my fault, they were against my will, and I did everything that I could with what I had to protect myself, and I still got hurt. Those things, we understand those from people. We feel sorry for them. But when we are the source of our own suffering, and when we engage in bad behaviors, nobody did it to us, we chose that action, that's really shameful. And there's no one to blame. And that's really hard. And even when I've worked through the shame, I don't feel shame for the things I've done anymore, because I accept, well, look at the growth that I've had. But I still feel embarrassment towards them. Because shame is about, I'm flawed as a person, and embarrassment is, oh, that doesn't really reflect who I want to be. I'm a little bit embarrassed because shame is so deeply personal. Like I said, that shame is gone, but it's still embarrassing to talk about some of that stuff, and putting it out there too. I know that it's going to exacerbate people making up rumors and people looking for other things. And it's also going to exacerbate people wanting to talk about it. Because I'll have to do interviews, and that's really uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
But again, I did it. You know, if I'm going to tell people to take accountability, I have to. So there were things I really wish I could hide from, and I probably could hide from them. But again, it would be dishonest and inauthentic. So putting them in there when people were saying, I'm going to buy your book, I still feel embarrassment towards them.
Yeah. Yeah. So your TEDx talk, you were talking about this stuff, right? Not just writing it. It's different. I mean, I've done both also. And when you're writing something, it's easy to kind of write it and then put it away, and I'm not going to look at it. But when you're talking about it, you're staring hundreds or maybe thousands of people in the face while you're saying these things. How the heck did you hold it together, especially knowing that your father was sitting there in the audience watching you?
Yeah. I think I have the advantage of psychology being my background, because I have learned really good emotional regulation skills. And again, that's one thing that I really wanted to provide people with the book, is those emotional regulation skills. And I recognize that feeling, no matter how many times I do it, is still going to be there. So I just lent into it. I didn't try and hide away from it. And while I was speaking, because I've gone through it so much and really processed it, it wasn't raw enough for me to be crying on stage. And I'm not someone that really cries that often anyway, but it still felt really raw. And instead of fighting that, I just let it. I let it feel raw on stage. And I think people felt it too.
Yeah.
And I didn't try and put up that fake persona of, I'm a finished product. I am a work in progress. And I let that human side, rather than the strict professor side, come through. And I realized people really resonated with that, because they said they felt it. And I did feel, when I was talking about my past experiences and things I had gone through, I felt I was more composed. The second I mentioned something about my dad, I had that pain in my throat and that feeling in my stomach. And I thought, oh, I can't break down on stage. I just tried to power through it. I reminded myself too, my dad's here and I'm here to make him proud. And I need to give this information to other people. They need this. So I was reminding myself of why I'm here, you know, telling myself to keep it together, but allowing the emotion to come through. And that comes with practice and time. And it's not something that I have always been able to do. You know, we see people on stage and we think, I'm never going to be able to do that because I'm too emotional, I have too much anxiety, all of these things. Well, so did I when I started speaking. You know, it takes time and practice. And when you're talking on personal topics, give yourself time. You know, practice ahead of time. But give yourself time. Be compassionate with yourself.
Don't get up and no practice and talk about the deepest things in your life.
And to be fair, that's one thing that I think has been a superpower for me is I am so prepared. And when people say they wing it,
definitely are.
I won't wing it. I will always come prepared. And that has really helped me because I am someone that does get anxious for speeches, but I can get on stage and everyone's like, wow, you weren't nervous at all. And I was very nervous. I was just
You're just prepared. No, I get that. I find that the more prepared I am, the less my nervousness shows also. right?
Yes.
Because it's almost like I know what I'm going to say next. Whereas if I'm not prepared or I have to do something last minute, I'm thinking about what I have to say next while saying the present thing, and it comes off like I'm not really focused,
Yes.
which is true. I'm not, right? So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, this is going to be a great book, I think, Abbie. I think for a lot of people, men, women, both, I think they're going to find some seriously empowering messages in here. And I think it's going to help a lot of people pass not just the things that you went through, but I think whatever they're going through. I think it's going to be a really good motivational, but not like one of those rah unicorns and flowers.
Yeah.
But a real great healing book. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for being willing to talk about it too.
Thank you.
Now, before we close up, we have a couple questions I always ask on this podcast. First and foremost, of course, we'll put a link to your book in the show notes, but do you have a book that you've read that you're always like, this, I want, if I can tell one book to somebody that they should read, this is the one besides your own?
The Gift of Fear. It's such a fantastic book. It teaches us to understand again that our emotions are telling us something. This one focuses on fear, but it's understanding that our emotions serve a purpose and we should lean into them and look to understand them instead of dismiss them and try and run away from them. And it's just written so beautifully.
Yeah, it's a great book. Okay. Now, most of us, I know me for sure, did not get to where I am today without some people mentoring. So do you have any mentors in your life that, you would not be sitting in that chair right now doing the things that you've done without those people?
Yes, I have a few. Of course, I always mention Professor David Keatley.
Yeah, he's awesome.
I would not be where I am today without him. He is one of the smartest people I've ever met, kindest people I've ever met. He was my supervisor as an undergrad, and we started working together when I was 18, publishing research papers, and he inspired me to be a researcher. Mm-hmm. And then as I was working through my PhD, I started working with Joe Navarro, who has been a huge impact on my life. I can't thank him enough for the way that he has changed my life, both personally and professionally. Mm. And then he also introduced me to you.
Yeah, Joe's the center of everything, isn't it?
Yeah, and the final thank you is to you, because this book wouldn't exist without you. I wrote it, but I would have been way too scared to publish it. Through working with you and the way that you have taught me empathy for both others and myself, I learned to accept myself. And you said something to me when I said I wanted to publish this book, but I was scared for the effect that it would have on my career, because I do admit some bad behaviors in there. And you said to me, it will never affect my place in this company. And if anything, you think that it makes me better because I've changed and because I've grown from it. And just having that safe foundation was so huge for me. And it finally gave me the psychological safety to say, I can accept myself, and that's okay.
Thank you for that. But I do agree with that. I think when we open up and we talk about our flaws, people see us as more human, and then they feel more comfortable talking to us about problems or issues, because we're not this, person that sits up on because we all try to put the best face on, right? Like every day, we don't want, like, none of us go on Instagram saying, man, I really suck today and everything's bad. It's always the best pictures, right? So we don't want to do that. So it's, I don't think that this could ever hurt your career here or anywhere. I really don't.
We can't change the past. All we can do is learn from it.
Yeah.
And if we hide from it, it's likely to come out anyway. Yeah. So all we can ask from people is changed behavior. And as long as we learn from the bad things we've done and we change our behavior consistently, well, isn't that all we can want from people?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. 100%. Well, I can't thank you enough for opening up here. And I can't thank you enough for being part of our company, and especially this book. I think, really, folks, if you're listening to this, you need to go out and get it and read it. It is worth every moment you will spend reading it and rereading it. So go get your copy now. Okay. It's, Work in Progress, The Road to Empowerment, The Journey Through Shame. There will be a link in the show notes. And again, Dr. Abbie, thank you for coming on the Human Element series today.
Thank you for having me.
Everyone, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you really enjoyed this episode. Next month, we're going to be with Adam D'Amico. He is the guitarist and one of the founders of Lorna Shore. And it's going to be a fascinating conversation all about not what you think. It's not about music at all. So join us and you'll find out. Till then, stay safe. See you.